For most of the 20th century, Queen Elizabeth II was the most Anglican woman alive, head of the Church of England, defender of the faith, the face of British Protestant continuity. And in October 1986, a letter went from a London genealogy office to Margaret Thatcher's prime ministerial desk that contained a single sentence that, if true, would rewrite the religious identity of the British crown. The letter said, "It is little known by the British people that the blood of Muhammad flows in the veins of the Queen." The letter was real. The man who wrote it spent the last 20 years of his life telling anyone who would listen that the Queen of England descended 43 generations back from the Prophet of Islam. The story has been printed and reprinted in every English-speaking newspaper in the world for almost 40 years. It has been endorsed in carefully chosen language by an English historian, by a former Grand Mufti of Egypt, and by a Moroccan journalist who published a detailed chart in 2018. And somewhere in the middle of the genealogical chain, on a battlefield in Spain on a specific afternoon in May, the entire story walks into a wall that almost nobody who repeats it on television seems to want to mention. The letter to Thatcher was written by a man named Harold Brooks Baker. He was the publishing director of Burke's Peerage, the venerable London directory of British aristocracy. Brooks Baker was American by birth. He was a former bond trader, charming and available to journalists at any hour of the day. His obituary in the Daily Telegraph said he was often wrong. The letter asked Thatcher to commission a royal security review on the argument that since the Queen was descended from the Prophet, the royal family was therefore safe from Muslim violence. The British press treated it as a curiosity. Buckingham Palace ignored it. But Brooks Baker had not invented the chain. He had inherited it from a more serious figure, Sir Ian Moncrieff of that ilk, Albany Herald of the court of the Lord Lion, who in 1982 had published a richly illustrated book for the birth of Prince William called Royal Highness, Ancestry of the Royal Child. In that book, Moncrieff traced William's ancestry back through the medieval kings of Castile to a Muslim princess. Brooks Baker took the chain, added one more link at the end, sent it to Thatcher, and a rumor was born. The princess at the center of the chain was a real person. Her name was Zaida. She lived at the court of Al-Mu'tamid, the third and last Abbasid king of Seville, the most refined Muslim court in 11th century Iberia. Al-Mu'tamid was a poet. He had been a friend, then an enemy, then a victim of the Almoravid Empire of Morocco. In 1091, the Almoravids took Seville. Al-Mu'tamid surrendered the Alcazar and was exiled to Aghmat near Marrakesh, where he died writing some of the saddest verse in the Arabic language. Zaida fled north with her children and threw herself on the protection of King Alfonso VI of Castile. She converted to Christianity. She took the baptismal name Isabel. She became, depending on which medieval chronicle you trust, his mistress or his fourth wife, or both in sequence. She bore him one son. The son's name was Sancho. And in May 1108, an Almoravid army caught the Castilian forces in the field near a town called Ucles. And on the 29th of May 1108, Sancho Alfonses, the only son of Zaida of Seville, was killed in the rout. He left no children. The chronicles agree. The Annales Toledanos agree. Rodrigo Jiménez de Rada, writing within living memory, agrees. Sancho died without issue, which is to say the chain that the entire claim depends on ends on that battlefield. In March 2018, a Moroccan journalist named Abdelhamid Al-Aouni published a long article in the weekly newspaper Al-Ozboue that revived the story and gave it new numbers, 43 generations, a complete chart. Al-Aouni told The Economist that the connection builds a bridge between our two religions and kingdoms. The British historian David Starkey was asked about it by the Times of London. He said it is not at all outlandish. The medieval monarchs of Spain and the Islamic royal houses were very close and totally intermeshed. What Starkey did not say, and what was buried in most retellings, was the second half of his comment. The claim had not been verified or widely accepted by historians. He was vouching for plausibility, not for the chart. Ali Goma, former Grand Mufti of Egypt, went on Egyptian television and said the Queen's grandfather had been a Muslim coerced into Christianity in Britain. Her actual grandfather was King George V. Goma probably meant ancestor. The mistranslation entered the international press anyway. The resistance to the claim is not a single objection. It is a chain of them, each of which on its own would be survivable, but stacked together they collapse the whole structure. The first is the battlefield at Ucals. The published charts have Edward IV descending from a great-granddaughter of Sancho, but Sancho had no granddaughter, and no granddaughter could have existed because Sancho was 28 days married when he died, and his bride bore no surviving child. The second objection is older. The medievalist Bernard Riley, in his 1988 Princeton monograph on the reign of Alfonso VI, argued there were two successive queens named Isabel at the Castilian court, only one of whom was Zaida, and the daughters who continue the line are the daughters of the first Isabel, not of Zaida at all. The third objection is the deepest. Even if Zaida were the queen, and even if Sancho had survived, the Abbasid kings of Seville, from whom Zaida supposedly descended, were not Hashemite. They were Lakhmid Arabs, a Christian Arab dynasty from southern Iraq that came to Spain in the 8th century. They were not from Muhammad's clan. The claim that they were descended from Hassan ibn Ali has no contemporaneous Arabic source. As New Lines magazine put it bluntly, claiming descent from the Prophet was, in the medieval Muslim world, what claiming descent from Charlemagne was in medieval Europe. Politically necessary, genealogically promiscuous. Burke's Peerage, the institution whose name carried this claim around the world for 36 years, has now distanced itself from it. In 2022, asked by both Snopes and Middle East Eye, the company said, quote, "Unfortunately, we have no genealogical information relating to this. We were not the original source." End quote. They went further. Asked about the Brooks-Baker letter specifically, they replied they had no record of it. The letter their own publishing director had written in their name in 1986, asking the Prime Minister to commission a security review on the strength of the chain, was, the company now said, not something they had on file. The journalist Leslie Hazelton, biographer of the Prophet, put the broader point cleanly to History.com. Quote, "If you go back far enough, you can find some kind of third cousin 99 times removed for anybody in the world." End quote. The mathematics of medieval ancestry are such that almost any modern European is, by some untraceable path, descended from almost any medieval European who left descendants at all. That fact does not validate the specific chart. It only means the interesting question is no longer whether Elizabeth was descended from Muhammad, but whether anyone has actually drawn the line. Nobody has drawn it, not in any peer-reviewed academic journal, not in any source that has survived scrutiny by the working medievalists of Iberian history. What exists is one popular book by a Scottish herald in 1982, one letter by a publicist to a prime minister in 1986, one weekly newspaper article in Rabat in 2018, and a chain of repetitions in the world press that have rarely paused to read each other. Buckingham Palace has never officially responded. Patricia Grieve of Columbia University, asked directly, called the underlying material suppositions and guesswork. There is the strongest case for the claim, and there is the documentary record, and they have never quite met. What the story tells you, when you take it apart link by link, is less about the Queen than about the appetite we have for chains. 43 generations is an arresting number. 2 religions joined at the bloodline is an arresting story. The medieval record is sparse enough, and the chronicles disagree enough, and the names are old enough that almost any chain can be drawn. Whether the chain can be defended is a different question, and that question, in this case, has an answer that has been sitting in a Princeton University Press monograph since 1988 that nobody quoting Brooks-Baker on cable news has ever seemed especially eager to read. If you found this fascinating, hit subscribe for more stories like this.